He's a mensch.
Well, and I just feel like even like socially, he's like such a good person. Like I feel like he's like his behavior is as ethical as his.
He's a really, really kind soul, and you can see because I've started spending more time in Baltimore. Just by working with him, and we walk down his block, and everyone knows him. And
I would imagine.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Welcome to the Clarinet Ninja podcast. My name is Jay Hassler.
Hey, I'm Virginia MacDonald.
As always, I am doing my best to bring you the finest in clarinet information and entertainment. Today, Virginia MacDonald has allowed me to invite myself to her home and hang out with her and our friend Olive and talk about the clarinet. Virginia has an album that has just come out. I believe it to be a work of unprecedented creative genius. We're going to get to that in a minute. But Virginia, talk to me about growing up in Canada, the daughter of, I've heard him called Canada's greatest saxophone player, Canada's greatest tenor player, like sort of a Canadian legend of, is that fair?
Yeah, it was a really interesting childhood for me. I grew up in a super artistic family, so my mom is actually a visual artist as well. And then with my dad, music was just kind of always there.
Right.
I think part of me assumed that was just the norm for everyone growing up, that, my dad is in his studio practicing for 6 hours a day, and my mom is doing her illustrations. So music was kind of always a constant for me, and art in our household. And I have such great memories of going to hear my dad play when I was younger, and sitting in these jazz clubs. And it's funny, like it was before smoking was banned in restaurants and bars. So, like me as like a 4 or 5 year old sitting there and watching my dad and being in these clubs, it was like, I just loved it so much. I loved the energy. I loved the vitality, I guess, of all of it.
As you're hearing all that, I mean, I'm assuming your dad played a little bit of clarinet, maybe a lot of clarinet. I don't know anything about that.
Not very much. I mean, we kind of joke about it now that he leaves the clarinet duties up to me. Yeah. I think so. My first clarinet, actually, to give a little bit of background, I always say my gateway instrument was recorder. And I think for many people in the American school system, that was kind of my first instrument. But I was involved in a community music program in Toronto from a very young age. I was about 5 or 6. And so at a certain point, historically what happened is you would be put into an ensemble at the beginning of a year, and we would meet every Saturday and get to play with other kids. And so when that happened, my dad kind of posed the question to me, well, now we're going to switch to, I shouldn't say a real instrument. I think that might have been the word that he used.
I mean, it's not totally unfair in terms of what are you going to actually, what's next? There's no, and then.
What's next? Yeah. So that was kind of the question that was posed. And I think what I remember, how I remember it, is I went into his studio and he had all these different instruments laid out. Like it was kind of like a Willy Wonka, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory type of thing. And so, obviously I had grown up seeing him play saxophone, and we had a piano at the apartment that we were living in at the time. I think there might have been like a flute. So there was all these different instruments, and I saw the clarinet, and I think that was my first time really seeing it. And I was just like entranced with it. I saw it and I thought it was so beautiful. I thought, I thought of them as buttons at the time, but all the keys and the key work. And I just thought it was like the most beautiful thing. And so I just thought, okay, that's the instrument that I'm going to play.
Ricardo Morales has almost the same story.
Really?
Because I looked at it and it was the perfect amount of wood and metal.
Yeah.
Like it was just exactly, it was perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if it was maybe like coming from recorder, because I really enjoyed playing it when I was a kid. And so I kind of saw maybe the similarities there. I always joke again with my dad. I'm like, well, I wasn't going to do the same thing as him. I had a mind of my own, I think even then as well. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got started. So I was around 6 years old at the time. my fingers weren't big enough to cover the key,
Sure.
the tone holes yet. So I waited about another year, I think.
Right.
My parents thought, okay, we'll give her a bit more time.
Right.
And then, yeah, from there on out, that was kind of the instrument for me. So, you know, it was interesting. Like, of course, my dad had an inclination where he felt he was going to teach me. And that was like
didn't work.
Absolutely
So
wrong.
I'm taking notes because my daughter is interested in playing the clarinet. Yeah. I fear the same dynamic.
I mean, as I get older and older, now I appreciate it more. And I think even then, like as I got into, you know, like my teen years, I would allow little moments of, okay, I'm listening. But it usually was under the guise of we're going to play something together.
Right.
So, you know, I have like a lot of memories of us sitting down when I was in high school, for example, and I would maybe be learning a jazz standard and he would play piano and, you know, he'd be playing some stuff and we'd talk about, okay, well, like what can I play over these chords? Like what can I be thinking over this chord progression? So if the information was fed to me kind of in an organic way,
right.
I'd accept it. But every time he tried to like sit down and teach me something, it was like I wanted none of it at the time.
Did you ever leave the house and say, when I get back, I want Cherokee and all 12 keys?
No, he did not. He did not. And I hope that doesn't ever happen to this day. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it was music was everywhere. Obviously, you know, he was very close friends with local musicians. So I grew up with these incredible musicians kind of hanging out in the apartment. People like Neil Swainson, great bass player who worked with Joe Henderson and Woody Shaw, and Pat LaBarbera, who later became one of my main mentors. But in a weird way, just kind of how you were talking about your daughter, it felt like, oh, well, that's just Pat, like that's just Neil.
Right.
You know, these are like my parents' friends who I've known since I was 3 years old, or, you know, whatever. But it was great. There was a lot of music, I think, happening at the time in Toronto. And I don't think there was ever a shortage of great music that I was exposed to.
Well, I've never heard your dad play. What style of jazz is his thing?
Yeah, good question. Well, so, you know, he's a tenor saxophone player, and I think definitely coming out of John Coltrane, for sure. But a whole lot of different influences there. Obviously, people like Charlie Parker. But, you know, there's
a real traditional jazz player.
I mean, so coming from that, but then coming out of that and writing his own music.
Well, I'm trying to disassociate him from like Gerald Albright or like smooth jazz.
No, yeah.
I'm trying to draw that.
Definitely not.
Yeah, okay,
no, and I think, you know, he's gonna kill me if I say the wrong thing and he watches this. I'm trying to like.
Oh no! Come on! I want to create family division. Please.
That's what this podcast.
Yeah, no,
that
was my plan all along.
No, I mean, I don't. Esoteric is the wrong word. I think, you know, but more modern. I think in certain ways, whatever that word may mean. But definitely, I think heavily influenced and coming out of that kind of 60s Coltrane sound.
Sure.
And so, yeah, like not to go veer off onto another path, but that was like a big part of what informed me musically, because I really just had this constant sound of saxophone, maybe more than clarinet or other instruments, kind of just everywhere around me. And my dad was always one of these like virtuosic practicers. Like I would grow up with him practicing 5-6 hours a day in that house. So I think he was kind of the one to, you should listen to Charlie Parker, you should listen to John Coltrane, you should listen to Sonny Rollins. And same thing, I think, where it was like, well, I'm not going to listen to those people. And then over time you kind of do start to listen and you're like, oh, this is the best thing ever.
They're as good as everybody says, right?
Yeah. So that was kind of my upbringing, I guess.
And so, like, when you decided you wanted to play clarinet,
yeah,
did you get like an R13 like immediately? Were
Yeah,
you
so it was my dad's instrument.
Okay.
And at that point, I mean, he really was not playing any clarinet. He didn't really work so much as a session musician. Like he really kind of focused on being out there with his own groups.
Right.
And so I think at a certain point, it was just like there was no practical use for him on the clarinet. So he had an old R13 from the 1960s. I still have it somewhere, and I'm not sure where right now, but it exists.
Yeah,
and
sure.
it's a great instrument. It was a beautiful instrument and a really great place to get started. I mean, that's what I play.
Well, so
now.
for the geekiest question in the world, what kind of mouthpiece did you have when you started?
Gosh, I mean, that's hard to remember. I mean, when I first started, I'm really not sure. Eventually, you know, I think when my parents saw that maybe I was taking it a little bit more seriously, we went out and we tried some different mouthpieces. I ended up with a B45. So that's what I played for quite a long time, you know, pretty standard. I had a couple of other ones like an M30, you know, like all of the classic Van Doren pieces. And so that's kind of where I got started. But the interesting thing is, you know, when it comes to gear and equipment, I was kind of just informed by saxophone players who doubled on clarinet.
Oh, right.
And that's who most of my teachers tended to be.
Right.
So, you know, and that's not to say, obviously, the B45 is a great mouthpiece
100%,
for a lot of reasons. But I think it was kind of like, okay, that seems like it would be the standard.
Right.
So we'll go with that. I didn't have a legitimate clarinet teacher, whatever that may mean, until I was about 15 or 16. Yeah. So up until then, it was a lot of guesswork.
So I've started my daughter on E-flat clarinet.
Wow.
And
okay.
So I just on Amazon ordered a BD5.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I wonder if this is good. So I tried it.
Uh-huh.
And now she doesn't have a mouthpiece anymore. To buy her another one.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're recommended so like readily for a reason.
Yeah, no, they're high quality.
Yeah.
You know, and affordable.
Yeah.
At what point do you feel like this click and like this is what I'm going to do? Was it immediate? Or,
yeah, it's a weird thing. I get that question sometimes, and I feel like sometimes I hear people answer the same question, and there's like a real immediate like this was the moment.
Right.
It didn't really happen that way for me. It was just kind of inevitable in the sense that it felt like this is going to happen. There wasn't like a question of whether or not I would do this. It was just like, well, yeah, I'm going to be a musician. You know, maybe part of it in a less romantic way or romantic sounding way, it was like, you know, I wasn't the best student. I think when I was in high school and even going into college, I was very focused on what I was focused on and what I enjoyed doing.
Right.
And otherwise, I had a really, really hard time. So, you know, I kind of, when I got into like my junior and senior years, it just felt like everything was even more background noise. It was like, this just makes sense. I'm good at this thing. It feels like the natural next step for me.
And then when you went to college, were you in a program that allowed you to just study jazz music, or were you also like learning like Rose etudes?
No, I got like a bachelor in music jazz performance. Yeah. So it was very much like a jazz performance degree and program. And, you know, it kind of continued this trajectory where I was studying with, you know, of course, a great saxophonist, but someone who didn't really have, you know, too much experience as a clarinet
like how to make the clarinet work.
Yeah, and, you know, it worked out. Like, so, you know, just to go backwards a little bit, when I first started taking lessons with a legit clarinet teacher, so my parents thought, you know, maybe at this point it would be good to like just get her to work on some foundational things or technique, or just, you know, make sure that everything is kind of where it should be with that. And immediately it was just kind of, it felt like your tone is wrong, your embouchure is wrong, your sound is wrong, your gear is wrong, it was just like a barrage of information of just like everything that you've been doing is not the correct way to do it.
Right.
And I I didn't like that. I mean, I was.
Well, who would be like, oh, great? Yeah,
Honestly.
It's hard to respond to that. And then,
Honestly, especially for a teenager, and I had been playing my instrument for, I guess at that point, like, 8, 9 years. And of course I was still a baby, and not to say that I was like some kind of like prodigy. I don't feel that I was, but it did kind of feel like, well, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't go along with like anything that I've been told by other people. And I felt very boxed in by that, and a bit frustrated. And I don't think that relationship did not last a very long time. I think the other thing that at the time was problematic for me is I was not used to learning things in such a structured way. A lot of what I learned was more by ear, where I would pick up on things, or I would learn songs and repertoire. But I wasn't as comfortable, playing scales or like working on arpeggios and these types of things in all 12 keys in a book. And I think that for me, that was always, and still to some extent continues to be a struggle. If there's not like a practical application of, for me, for working on something, I kind of have a hard time, right?
And so, like, if there's a direct application, it's really attractive because then you can do this thing better, right? Right now,
Yeah.
But in the abstract, scales are kind of boring. You may or may not know this. I am a frustrated jazz tenor player. Terrible. I'm terrible, but I don't.
I'm sure you're not.
It's not a part of my life anymore.
Yeah.
But I learned scales just from learning scales. I didn't read them.
Yeah.
And so, like when I opened the Behrman book, I'm like, oh, it's cute. They wrote all these down.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Like it still baffles me a little bit. And I feel like the way we learn scales as classical musicians needs to bring that in a little bit, because I think the musicianship part of it is also strengthened by that.
I think so too, and it just kind of, it's like firing at all cylinders. Like you work on your ear, you work on your theory in a way that you're actually internalizing it, because it's kind of like, oh, okay, it's related to this, or it's applicable here in this situation. And it's funny that you bring up the Behrman. Like that book was my nemesis. I hated it. I loathed it. I really, really, I have such unfond memories of that book. And now, of course, I'm older and I go, okay, I understand the purpose of having everything congregated like this in the way that it is. And, the exercises themselves are great.
Yeah, they're fantastic, sure.
But, 100%. For me, it was like, okay, you're going to go do this with the metronome at whatever, 60 BPM, and you're going to do C sharp major, and you're going to do the repeating scale or whatever. And it was just like, oh my God, no. I mean, that was just me. That was my experience.
When I was in high school, like there's the Behrman book, and then next to it was Patterns for Jazz, like the Jerry Coker and the Oliver Nelson, right? Because I was doing both of them, I never quite understood why somebody would open up the Behrman book and play through it like that, because you could just close it and play through it like that.
Yeah.
And then it's baffled me a little bit. So then you're in college, and I do remember when you were talking at the Clarinet Convention a few years ago.
Yeah.
You were talking about trying to find a way to fit the clarinet into music that people didn't necessarily inherently hear the clarinet.
Yeah, and so that was maybe an interesting part of my background, because I started playing so young. You lack that self-awareness. It's really a beautiful thing.
Sure.
I'm
aware.
Like, I'm just gonna play this song, and hopefully it's nice and it's fun. And then you get a little bit older, and it's kind of like, oh well, wait a second, I'm playing this instrument, and there's like 5 examples out there of people playing the same instrument and playing this style of music. And I'm exaggerating.
Sure.
I know there's more, but at the time there was not really anyone I was exposed to. I had like a couple of course, like Benny Goodman CDs and
but if I might, in some way, as great as that is, it's almost unrelated to what you're trying to do at that point, right? Because so many years have gone by between. Yeah. Obviously he lived a lot longer, but in terms of his productive period, it's not like.
It was very different than even in like high school, even in college. It was very different than the musical aesthetic that I was part of, or that I was taking part in. So while I appreciate, oh, okay, so I have these Benny Goodman, I have a couple of Buddy DeFranco albums, and so of course I would listen and go, okay, so they're doing this, and wow, the interesting thing about the clarinet lineage in jazz is I find that almost all of the clarinetists, without fail, are very virtuosic. So I would listen to that and I'd go, wow, okay, so that's really impressive. But I had a hard time relating to it again, just because I felt like the aesthetic was maybe a bit far removed from what I was into. And at that time, I was starting to listen to more musicians like John Coltrane or Joe Henderson or Sonny Rollins. And it just felt, I struggle to use this word because it means, the meaning is subjective, but it felt more modern.
Right.
And I mean, I guess if you look at the time, it was more modern in a sense. So when I started taking my music career, at that point it wasn't really a career, but when I started thinking, okay, I'm going to do this, it was like, okay, well, there's not a lot of people that I can listen to. And then I started looking around, and it was like, oh, people want to have a more traditional front line in their band. They want to have saxophone and they want to have trumpet.
Right.
Who's hiring clarinet players to play in like a jazz quartet or quintet. And so that was kind of like all right, like what am I doing here type of moment. But I think, I was self-aware of that, but I also kind of felt like I need to, and I will make it work,
Well, when I hear you play, I feel like you have definitely forged your own path. I mean, I don't,
Thank you.
like I was telling you earlier, I can't necessarily directly connect.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like it. Like I think it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And when I went to hear you and Todd Marcus play down at Smalls,
Yeah.
to hear the two of you play together, that's like, that's such a special thing to have so much clarinet represented in such a wonderful way, but in ways that is coming out of a tradition, but isn't beholden to the tradition in a way that it is something. It's going off in a way that's beautiful and creative and artistic, and it makes a lot of sense to me for you to have gone through a struggle with like, how do I fit in here? How do I make this work?
Yeah.
When not necessarily that nobody wants it, but nobody's looking for it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
no, exactly. I don't think it wasn't like, oh, like I don't want clarinet in my. It was just like, well, that doesn't exist, does it? It was kind of like
right.
more like that, and like the few people who, again, like when I was kind of like in my, I don't know, like late teens, early 20s, it was like, oh, okay, there's people like Anat Cohen, oh, there's people like Eddie Daniels, there's people, so you start putting together this list of names,
right.
which is, but still relatively small.
When people think of the clarinet, they think of like New Orleans style, they think of swing style.
Yeah.
And then there's Buddy DeFranco.
Yeah.
And Eddie Daniels.
Yeah.
And there's so few bebop clarinet players.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the lineage continued.
Yeah.
En masse through that period.
No, definitely not. And, Buddy DeFranco is kind of a great example. And so one of the things, like when I started listening a little bit more, that I don't know if frustrates the right word, but it just, it was kind of like, I would listen to someone like Buddy DeFranco and I go, okay, wow, like here's a great bebop clarinet player. But still, it seemed very isolated. And I think maybe, again, it was that same thing where it was like, like it was more popular at the time to have saxophone and trumpet in a front line. And so, it's not like Buddy DeFranco was doing a lot of work as a side person.
Right.
In the sense that it's like, you look at someone like John Coltrane or Sonny Rollins or Joe Henderson, or even going into trumpet players, people like Lee Morgan or Kenny Dorham, where they would collaborate very often, and they would have their own projects, but they would collaborate with different musicians as a side person. And so, like even with someone like Buddy DeFranco, it was like, okay, well, this still feels quite isolated in the sense that, there's like, it's a very specific thing. Right. And the big thing though that really started to jump out to me more as it felt like, maybe, and I talk to different clarinet players about, why this may be. The vocabulary felt very different to me than it felt like there was a bit more of a universal vocabulary that trumpet players and saxophone players and piano players shared. And it felt like clarinet was like somehow outside of that and a little bit different than that thing.
Yeah,
and so
sure,
that kind of led me to listening more to, okay, well, if I'm gonna transcribe something, I might gravitate more towards a trumpet solo or a sax solo.
Well, that's going to my next question. Like in terms of a non-clarinet jazz record, like could you pinpoint like this is the one I listen to the most?
No, I mean there's so many.
So just pick one and pretend.
I can't.
Okay, pick two.
Pick two. I mean any of Bird's discography.
Let me make it harder for you.
Don't do that.
A non-saxophone,
non-saxophone.
Yeah, like.
Okay, so trumpet, yeah. I mean,
or piano, or maybe
different instruments. I mean, I listened to a lot of trumpet players, and I transcribed a lot of trumpet players because the range is so similar to clarinet. Sure. With tenor, alto, it would work. Tenor was very hard because nothing would be intuitive on the instrument.
Right.
You would end up having to play things an octave higher or like kind of jumping down.
Yeah.
But so I started kind of focusing more on trumpet players. So people like Clifford Brown. Lee Morgan, more modern players who, so still living, like Tom Harrell, Kenny Dorham. And so what I found, first of all, is, oh, wow, this is great. Like this sits kind of just above the throat register of the instrument a lot of the time.
Right.
Going down into the throat register as well. Unless you have like a real like lead player, most of the, most trumpet solos that you listen to within the context of jazz are going to be within the staff. Or maybe up to like a high A flat or B flat concert. Okay. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like it all felt like, oh wow, this fits really well. So like I started listening to like one of my favorite records. If I have to, I mean, I can't narrow it down, but this is one that comes to mind.
Sure.
Would be In and Out, which is Joe Henderson with Kenny Dorham. And so, just like listening to his sound, it was like, oh man, like I want to sound like that on clarinet because everything felt so seamless and smooth. And, it was like the articulation. I hadn't really heard the same thing yet on clarinet. So it was like, I'm going to try to do that as much as I can on my own instrument, if that makes sense.
No, but you're talking about Kenny Dorham more than Joe Henderson.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I love Joe Henderson too, but it was like, oh, Kenny Dorham, like what a beautiful sound. Like, wow. And also it was like very flexible, the way that he was bending notes and, the way that he would attack a note or start a note and like end a note, like falling down from it or lift up to it. It was like, I want to get that sense of fluidity, so I started listening to a lot more. Like I would listen to someone like Clifford Brown play ballads. And I wasn't even so concerned about like the vocabulary, but it was more like, I'm going to like just try to play these solos by ear and match the sound that these musicians are getting.
From a classical standpoint, I would listen to a lot of Fritz Kreisler play the violin and transcribe that.
Yeah.
Right? Because it brings out so, like you're talking about articulation, the way they start, the way they end, and what they do in the middle. Yeah. Like it's much different than what happens on a clarinet.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's so much to learn from that.
Yeah. And so that was like a real learning because when I started transcribing more and more musicians, it was like, I would transcribe a Sonny Rollins solo, for example. And I would play it, I would do it by ear. That's still, if I do something like that, I always do it by ear. And I would play it and I'd go, okay, well, I know that the rhythm's right. I know that the notes are right. Why does it not sound as good?
Yeah.
And like, it's like, okay, well, I'm not Sonny Rollins. But also, I think what was lacking is like the phrasing and the nuance of how things were played.
Right.
And I always felt really jealous because it was like, oh man, like these like sax players, like the trumpet players, the trombone players, like they can so readily like bend notes and like kind of like have these inflections in their tone. And I felt like I was really struggling with that.
Interesting.
For a long time. And so that was kind of like my gateway into like, oh, okay, so I can do these things with my sound. It is possible, but I need to figure out my own way of doing it.
So,
Olive,
Olive, you're the best.
The danger's gone. We're all good. We're all good here.
And we were calm the whole time because we knew you were going to do it.
Thank you.
We knew it.
Yeah.
So this album is out. I don't know. I'm a bad interviewer for not knowing this. Is this your first album, second album, third album, 15th album?
So this is my first album as a band leader. Yeah.
Fantastic.
So it's my first album, that I've put together myself, my own band, my own compositions, own music. Yeah.
So are these all your compositions?
6 of my own tunes, and then 2 standards, 2 ballads. I love playing ballads. And I picked 2 of my favorites, Stardust, and Duke Ellington's Sound of Love by Charles Mingus. So, and those are 2 duets. So Stardust is a duo with Ira Coleman on bass, and Duke Ellington's Sound of Love is with Jeffrey Keezer on piano.
Wonderful.
So aside from that, everything is original.
Okay, so here's what I want to know, and I don't know, this might be a dumb question. Just pretend it's not, even if it is.
I won't.
Do you find either moving forward in time or looking back in time a difference in how you approach improvising over a standard versus your own composition?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really great question. I think yes and no. I think there's a lot of freedom to playing over your own music.
Right.
Because no one knows what it's supposed to sound like.
Right.
You know, not that playing over standards or like jazz repertoire is supposed to sound a certain way. I don't. But you know, we have an impression in our mind. So I think that there's like a real sense of freedom to that, which is nice. Not to say that I don't feel that when I'm performing other people's music or standards or whatever.
Right.
But I think that it's just like it's really tenfold when it's your own music. Like it's like, oh, okay, well I can really stretch out on this and I can try things. So that part of it is nice. It's a good and bad thing. Like with standards in the jazz discourse, like especially when we look at Great American Songbook standards, there is such a long lineage. If you look at, you know, a song like Stardust, the life of that song, the amount of times it's been recorded, the amount of times it's been performed,
right.
You know, we're talking about like 100, close to 100, if not 100. I think it was 1920. It's like, don't quote me on that if I'm wrong. But it's...
She said 1926.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, it's a very long life for a song. And so, you know, certain things kind of just end up being part of, you know, what happens when people interpret a song or a standard. And there are ways around that. I think there are ways to make it more original, but you are coming at something that already has a lot of history behind it. You know, so I think that not for everyone, but I do think for a lot of musicians, that's going to inform at least a little bit what you're thinking about playing or how you're thinking about it. It's also a matter of, for me, respecting the songs that you play. You know, I think that more and more, especially as I get older, it's like I want to try to steer away from, no pun intended, from using these songs as vehicles to just like play my shit. It's like you know, I don't want to play like Someone in Love and then like start like ripping 16th note lines. You know, it's like, well, can I do something that's related to the intent of the song?
Right.
And if it's not related, then I better change it in a way where it feels very intentional. Yeah, and I feel the same performing, you know, colleagues' music. Like it's why I love the project I have with Todd Marcus so much, because we play both of each other's compositions. So we'll do a mix of some of my stuff, some of Todd's stuff. Every now and then we'll throw in, I guess, not standards or lesser known standards, or, you know, just compositions from people like Larry Willis, for example. But again, it's like we have that trust in each other where we're co-leading, and it's like he trusts me to interpret his music and be myself while doing it, and vice versa, me, him. You know, and like he might do things that I wouldn't have expected or that I didn't write down. And me, same thing with him. Like I'm probably going to interpret his music in a way that maybe he wouldn't necessarily think of doing. So with more modern music, in the sense of like, you know, the composer's still living and, you know, maybe we're playing together or it's part of a project like that, I kind of feel the same thing with creative license, where it's like, well, this is like an unwritten story so far, in a way.
When I went down and heard you guys play at Smalls, I guess it was probably about a year ago.
I think like last July.
I felt like I was hearing creative energy when I imagined what it was like to go down to the Village Vanguard in the 60s and hear people like really committed to jazz music and
Right.
the art form and their playing and their expression, and it wasn't only about it was what the music plus the people.
Yeah.
Right. And that it was really inspiring to hear, because it felt fresh, it felt new, it felt like I was hearing something
Yeah.
that was, I mean, important. It's certainly important to me that to be able to hear it live.
Right.
But is the music important? I don't know. That's a whole other big question, right?
Yeah.
But I get into that.
Yeah.
But in the sense, like, I'm hearing something that is as much what the artistic process is really about, like unfolding in real time.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. I think the interesting thing too to think about that we don't consider quite as much is like for those guys, like thinking about people like Miles Davis, for example. I mean, in a lot of ways, they were playing the pop songs from when they were growing up.
Sure.
You know, like they weren't really as far removed from it as we are.
Sure.
Right? You know, like now it's like, okay, well, these songs are part of the larger whatever discourse or just history of playing this music. But at the time, you know, like it wasn't like commonplace necessarily. Like, okay, we didn't have like 50 recordings already of, you know, all the things you are or whatever.
Sure. God, I think I've got my words right now.
Yeah.
I felt like I heard you guys creating rather than recreating.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of you know, and particularly in the classical world, we are so often recreating. Like that's largely what you hear. That's what people want to hear in a concert hall. And new music is very challenging to make accessible.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what I walked away, because I mean, like feeling like, okay, here are two people, like all the things you said, trust each other, like each other, respect each other, making music in a format that I know in terms of rhythm section and front line, but the front line is dramatically different. And you know, and exactly what I'm into, right, with the clarinet. But that it was music that was being created right then by these people. Like there was no recreation process.
No.
I didn't hear things that I'd heard before. I didn't hear the same chord changes that I'd heard before. I mean, so there's a blues. Like, you know, I've heard those changes before. But in the sense that like I was experiencing new things, but it wasn't like hearing new things like I'm listening to, like, you know, Albert Eiler. Like new things that like are so divorced from the,
I understand what
there was
you're
a
saying.
grounding in it, but a freshness that was really amazing.
Definitely. And I think in a way, like that's some of my favorite music to play. Like when it comes to Todd's compositions as well, there's a lot of freedom, you know, like the parts themselves. So like if we're playing melodies together or, you know, harmonies, whatever, the parts that are written are actually quite specific.
Right.
But then when it comes to improvising, a lot of the forms are left quite open. And I love that. I love that there's agency for, you know, whoever else is in the band. You know, it can be myself, but for Eric Kennedy, for example, our drummer, who's an absolute powerhouse, it's like he can do his thing. And Todd is going to give him the agency to like stretch out and make it his own. And I think that's the thing maybe too that I like about composing my own music and playing my own music, is it's like I find myself doing the same thing, and it differs from person to person. Some people are very, very specific about what they want their band to be doing. I think, you know, I'm speaking from the perspective of a horn player. Like it's like very particular, like, oh, the rhythm section should be doing this in this moment, and the drummer should be doing this, and it's a little bit more specific. What I find myself tending towards is always more, well, like, I'm hiring you for a reason. And it's because I trust you, you know, not to make a right or wrong decision, but I trust you to do what you would do. And I want that input as well, right? So it's nice because I think you're right. Like, it really feels like creating something, and not just like, okay, we're all going to have this goal of playing the standard. And we're still trying to create, I think, when we do that. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love playing standards. I really, really do. But I think that there is something very, very special about, you know, with new music. It's like, oh, okay, we can do this together. And, you know.
So now, speaking of new music and new compositions, I'm going to ask you a completely unfair question.
Oh, no.
Which one? Again, just pick one. I don't really like of the new compositions we're going to hear on your record. Is there one that stands out to you as meaning more like that's like special? Like, which one of your children do you like the best? Like I feel like that's kind of the question, right? I'm just looking for you to point out one that we can listen to and we can enjoy with a little bit of insight from you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think just because we're talking about it, like the first track on the album is Last Call at Dimitri. So this is the first single that came out. And I kind of love it because it's like part of both of those worlds. So it's a 12-bar blues,
Right.
just a standard 12-bar blues in F, but coming from like this like weird kind of mysterious openness at the beginning,
Right.
and it's quite ambiguous, and then eventually it's like, oh, okay, that's what's happening. So like for me again, like I like creating music like that, not solely, but I like creating music like that because it's like, oh, okay, there's a reference to this, and there's a reference to that part of my history and what I've listened to and what I gravitate towards. But then it's also my own, and it's my own take on something that we're all familiar with.
Is Dimitri's a place or a person?
It is a place.
It's a place. It's a place. Okay.
It is
I'm assuming a bar.
It's a bar.
Okay.
That's actually, I think, the first song that I ever wrote as well. I was a baby when I wrote it, but it's, for some reason, I don't know, people seem to like it.
Well,
it's a fun one.
It feels really good to listen to. Like, it brings delight, which is so it's good. Are there any tunes that have an unusual form or something that is harder listening?
Yeah, definitely. One that comes to mind is actually the closer on the album, which is Eternal Return of the Same. So getting a bit into the philosophical realm there. And that one actually came from a solo clarinet piece that I wrote. And when I say wrote, I mean, I just kind of was messing around and I came up with it. And it's when I actually went to write it down, I was thinking, this would be a nice thing to do with quartet or like with my band. And I was like, well, how do I go about writing this? And when I was playing it, I wasn't really thinking about the meter that it was in. And then I went to write it down and it was like, okay, so it's a mix of like 5/8, a mix of 3, a mix of, 4 and so on. So it's a mixed meter composition. And it kind of has like it's a cyclical form that it follows the whole way through. So that would be one that I guess is a little bit more unconventional.
Well, and the improvisation happens over those mixed meters as well?
It does. Well, I made Jeffrey Keyser do that. I am soloing over 3/4. But I mean, I left it in more than capable, maybe the most capable hands. I mean, I actually finished that song. I had spent some time on it and I was kind of like waffling on what to do with the solo section. And eventually, I think I ended up actually coming in with a completed chart on the day of the session.
Right.
And I just put it in front of Jeff. I was like, do you think you can solo over this part that alternates between 5 and 3? And he was like, let's give it a try. And it sounded amazing. So it was like, all right, you can do that. I'll solo over 3. We're good. The type of thing too where it's nice, where you can kind of go into the studio, and again, it's about that thing where I can trust this person to interpret this how he or she may see fit.
Can we get nerdy for a second?
Yeah.
What kind of clarinet do you play now?
Oh, okay. So I call it my Frankenstein. It's an R13. And I call it that because it's 2 different serial numbers. So the top joint and the bottom joint are different serial numbers. They're both R13s from the 90s. Yeah. I've been playing that instrument since I was 18 or 19.
And did it come with 2 different joints, or did you do that? Okay, so no, that
it
wasn't
came like that. Yeah, I got it at a vintage clarinet shop in Toronto, my hometown, and I think at the time it was maybe like $1,200. It was quite cheap,
It's ironic and sad that that's now cheap, because it seems like
I know.
but it is.
Yeah, but for a good instrument, like it was in great condition.
Yeah, right.
And so it was like a real full circle moment for me when I started endorsing Buffet. Right. It was like, oh wow, like I started on an R13. I've been playing these instruments my whole life. And so I've had the opportunity. I've thought about switching, but I'm so happy with my horn. I love it, and I tend not to be a gear person for the most part. Right. So when I find something that works, it's like, okay, I'm gonna stick with this as long as I can. So yeah, I mean, eventually I will probably need to get a new clarinet, but I can't yet.
Okay. Yeah. And is my memory right that you were playing on a crystal mouthpiece of some variety?
Yeah. So, and that kind of happened by chance. Like I said, I started out on a B45. I think when I was maybe in my early to mid 20s, someone bought or they gifted me a Pomerico crystal mouthpiece. I'd never seen one. I'd never heard of this material being used before for mouthpieces. And so I thought, okay, I'll try it out. I played like 2 notes and I was like, no, I can't do this. Absolutely not. It was so different than what I was used to. That I just thought there's no way. I was like, okay, no. And so I put it down and I was like, well, whatever. And for some reason, something told me, I was like, well, like, okay, maybe I'll try it this time for a little bit longer. What the issue I should say that I was having too is it was very resistant. It was a lot more resistance than I had been used to.
It's not vibrating at all, which is a weird feeling, right?
Absolutely. So it was like, okay, so let me try coming at this with maybe a softer reed and let me just like really just play into it, not expect anything. And then after a couple of weeks, it was like, oh, okay, I'm never going back. Like, I loved the crystal. That mouthpiece unfortunately broke. I mean, that's like the issue with that material. I've been playing.
They can all break, but
that's true.
But
that's a good point.
But yeah, you definitely can't drop those.
No, you can't put them together quite as easily again. So I've been playing a RIA, Italian, I guess, mouthpiece since 2020. Yeah. And so that one's even bigger than the Pomerico. So very, very large tip opening. And I use actually a 2 reed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In your practice now.
Yeah.
Like, as somebody who is with the Behrman, like how do you like what does a practice routine look like for you? I'm curious.
I don't know. I mean, it's terrible. Like, well, I'm on the road a lot. Right. I spend a lot of time traveling. I spend a lot of time touring. A lot of the time it's, and it's my music, but it's also other people's music. A lot of the time it's just repertoire. Right. It's like, okay, if I have a minute to practice, I'm going to sit down and I want to look at this music for this gig that I have coming up, or, I'm going on the road. Let me spend some time checking out these charts. And it's a blessing and a curse. I feel like I haven't had a regular practice routine in, I don't know, years at this point. And it's more, okay, I can sit down now. I have a bit of time, and I'm going to work on this thing. But the real great thing about that I love is that I'm always playing in some capacity. And I find that still propels me forward. So if I'm playing with other people, sometimes I find in a way that can be even more invaluable.
As an observer and somebody who has a clarinet in their hands a lot, your technique is very clean for somebody who doesn't like. But in having this conversation with you, you're much different than me. I have I practice in boxes, the boxes relate to one another, right? But I do practice this for this reason, for this intended outcome, right? And I feel like you have a different. I float around. Yeah, you've got a different way of going about it.
To be fair, I've had those periods in my life. I've had periods of very intense practice where I was, maybe doing 5, 6, 7 hours a day. Right. And that was much more, I guess, regimented, where it was like, I'm going to work on this thing, I'm going to work on this thing, and I'm going to do that. I think that set me up for a lot of success, for sure. And being able to, maybe take a few days off where I'm not playing, and then being able to get back to it and feel like the fluidity in my ideas isn't necessarily lost. Right. Maybe just because that foundation is there. That being said, I would love to have more time to practice.
When I don't know, when my life is busy or when I've been on the road, it is very difficult to have the energy to say, okay, let's sit down and play some long tones. Right.
It's difficult. And I mean, just even not time on the road, the day-to-day things, admin, sending emails, and booking, and I do a lot of my own tour organizing. So booking flights and
I get exhausted just hearing all of this. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So now in a way, when I do have that time to practice, it feels more precious in a sense. It's like, oh, now I can actually sit down and really be present with my instrument. Right. But, I think right now a lot of my practice is repertoire, in the sense that it's the way that I like looking at music that I'm working on is kind of thinking about how I improvise over it. And I go from a very methodical standpoint with that, where, I kind of one of the things I love doing is taking a look at, let's say, the first chord, and let's say it's a C minor. What I like spending time doing is just thinking about all of the different things that I could play over a C minor chord,
Right.
and then working through them,
Right.
and playing through some of those different ideas and patterns and vocabulary, and then moving on to the next chord and doing the same thing.
Right.
So it's like within the context of I'm practicing repertoire, there's still, I guess, like a certain amount of specificness
Sure.
to it.
Right.
But I would love, I miss just being able to sit down and saying, I'm going to work on this thing for, an hour, 2 hours.
So much of my practicing is for a different kind of specific goal, right? Because it's music that's already written down,
Right.
right? It's
Yeah.
like these are the series of notes you're going to play.
Yeah, right.
Right. And you lead a musical life that's not prescribed in the same way.
Yeah.
Right? There's boundaries, but it's not.
It's a very different thing. It's it's interesting that you bring that up. Like when I was still living in Toronto, I played with a classical piano quartet for a while. Like I was doing a few gigs with them, and I did a couple of recordings, and I was like shitting myself. I was so nervous. I was terrified going on stage in a way that I don't feel when I play jazz, because it's like, well, first of all, this is not my world.
Right.
There's a real sense, I guess, like an imposter syndrome. But also it's like, oh my God, like the notes on the page, like I must play this. Like I cannot play other things, There's no way to play it off if I don't play the right thing. It's like, I was so scared. I was just like terrified.
It's funny. I talked about it with Evan Christopher when he came in and did a podcast with me. I may have been one of the only people that remembers hearing him play a Brahms sonata.
Oh wow!
And
Wow.
He's very funny when he reflects upon what that was like. Because it's that was back before he switched to Albert system.
Yeah.
So it made a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
Not a whole bunch more sense, but a little bit.
But yeah. Wow. Wow.
So where is the best place? Like, let's say, and everybody should now be a huge Virginia MacDonald fan. Where's the best place to look for you? Like you got a website, I'm assuming.
Yeah, website. My website is virginiamacdonald.ca. Still rocking the Canadian URL.
I'm gonna put all these in the show notes in the description, so you can just click and find your way there. But what about your music? What if somebody wants to buy some music? Where do they go?
So it's all online. We're doing the whole streaming thing. So I'm releasing. The album has been released through a label, Cellar Music. So you can find out more about that on my website, on their website, also on Bandcamp, and all the streaming services. So Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Tidal, so on. I mean, there's like streaming services that I didn't know existed. I was like, what is this? Like, who listens to music on this? But it's out there.
That's great. So I will absolutely have links to everything Virginia MacDonald. And what a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for having me.
And Olive, who's off camera right now, thank you for having me here.
Thank you,
I think it's more important to thank you.
Yeah, she's the boss. She is the boss.
And I disrupted her more than I disrupted you. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
So listen, if you are an adult clarinet player and you're looking to up your game on the clarinet, I will also have links to me and the Clarinet Ninja Dojo, which is, if I do say so myself, really the best place to learn or relearn the clarinet if you're coming back from a 40 to 50 year layoff or less. So join us at the Clarinet Ninja Dojo. There also, if you go to my website, clarinetninja.com, there is a way to book time with me for free. And what you get is some insight into your playing, what I think you should do to make yourself a better clarinet player, and a little sales pitch at the end. That's what you pay for. What you pay with, let me say, is that little bit of a sales pitch. So with all that, thank you, Virginia.
Thank you, Jay.
So glad to be here. We'll see you next time on the Clarinet Ninja Podcast.